Okay, so we move on now to a different panel, hosted by our friends, our new friends from last year, from Tallinn, TGS Baltic. Their whole team is on the panel, coming from all three Baltic states. It's good to see them, so I would like to invite them on stage, and then I will flip the presentation.
Thank you. Do we need? You hear me, yes? I promise to be loud. So, plot twist. There has to be three of us, but your dear friend Brit is stuck flying to Vilnius, and that was cancelled too. I think now he's in Warsaw, or yeah. So I'm here to give his best regards. That Tallinn is a fantastic place for fintech industry. Not so good for connections. Flight connections.
Yes.
So we have to regroup and have a discussion between me. I am representing Legal Lithuania and Laura from Latvia. So we are lawyers, and lawyers is a particular group of people who always say no, even before business finishes asking the question. Can we do? No. Even if marketing comes, can we do this? No, you can't. Don't you even dare. And the best thing you can get from lawyers is fine until it's a fine. So today let's have a short discussion on what to do when you're scaling a gaming business in order to avoid fines, avoid the disputes with your co-founders or investors, to secure your assets, get financing, and scaling your business. So bear with us. We have to stand two of us instead of three. So let's start with financing. So when you have a good idea and your idea hit the ground running, it's a success. Consumers like it. But whether or not you like it or not, you have to have an investor in order to make your idea bigger. Unfortunately, in the history of world's best ideas, we don't have one which just lifted up without any investment. Laura, what we have to have in mind when we are thinking about investors and scaling gaming business?
First of all, let's break it down to the basics. So how we look at the finance, it's most probably either debt finance, so which means like loans, or it's equity finance. When I say equity finance, we mean most probably investors. So when we are talking about debt financing, we most probably first association would be banks. But I think it's no surprise for you that banks are not into gaming, and they are generally not into companies who are actually very heavily IP asset backed. What I mean with IP, like intellectual property assets, are the main assets that they have on hands, and it's exact thing with gaming. So, and why is that for banks? Because the regulators do not encourage them to take on risks by granting loans, which are for regulator view unsecured loans. And why is that? Because everything that is not tangible, it is very hard to comprehend for regulators and to assess the risk what is within this loan, and hence they are putting banks in situations where if they are providing loans which are non-tangible secured, they need to have additional capital requirements. And that, what does it mean for you? It means the cost for this type of finance, it goes like skyrocket high. Because banks don't know how to evaluate your assets, they need to allocate additional capital for your loans, and generally they are not interested in that type of companies because that is something like intangible. So on contrary with investors, which will be like equity funds or venture capitalists,
Private investors.
Private investors, they will look most probably at your future perspective. Like it would be like a business idea, and how do you think that you will monetize your assets and you will get revenues and cash flow, etc. But of course, for that type of investors, for you to be attractive, you need to have certain things in place.
Yeah, and that's come a second idea that we want you to have to bring that when you are a startup, first you need to look around private investors, hedge funds, private funds, and then maybe to banks. And there is a third layer of investment of attracting capital is bonds.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it will be going to capital markets, which you can do like via issuing like stocks or bonds, which would be either an equity or.
So it's the third level. But before you enter even the first level of scaling, you need to keep your assets in order. And that's the first thing of hygiene you have to do before you even go speaking with an investor, bank, fund, or hedge fund. Because intellectual property assets are fantastic. The protection appears from the moment you create an asset. So if we're talking about gaming industry, it's a code. In the gaming industry, it's a code, an interface, maybe some characters, everything that you can see on the screen. And everything that is written in a code is protected from the moment it is created. So the moment coder is putting the code down, the moment designer is finishing the final touches on design, boom, it's it. It's automatic and it covers all countries of Berne Convention, which today is over 180 countries. It's instant protection. But if it's in your head or it's in the cloud, it's not good enough for investors because they need to see these assets in your books. And before you record assets in your books, you need to get in order. And the biggest disputes that we get against the founders is that they disagree on who is the author. And the problem is that sometimes we have a group of 2 guys, 3 guys, girls included. Let's not be excluding girls, but we have 2 people, and one of them has an idea. And has the idea and scheme on and all the processes and algorithms on how this game should look like. And there is another guy or a girl who does the coding. And what do you think? Who owns the copyright to the final game? The one who has an idea or the one who wrote the code? Yes, exactly. Unfortunately, I don't have this. I came unprepared. But yes, you are very correct, the one who wrote the code. Because copyright does not protect ideas. Copyright does not protect systems, processes. So anything that is not written in as a code or expressed as a design is not protected. But if we talk with those founders, they feel much as authors as the coder is. So what do you need in place? An agreement. Because if you do not have agreement, and you do not start a startup with an agreement, this is the last thing of mine, is to have some paperwork, because you first do the coding, and afterwards you do the paperwork. But when you start doing the paperwork, it's like asking your wife to sign a prenup after your business scaled, and instead of a couple of thousands in the bank, now you have a stock which is worth of millions. Good luck with that. You will need a big diamond for that. So the same goes with dealing with your investors and your friends. But you need to make those papers in order. Investor needs to know who are the authors and who has ownership to the code. And the code is not something that you created and your job's done. It's a living organism. It has to be developed. So you need to secure agreements to show that you are able to develop it throughout, 200 years, maybe more, depending on how long into the future you're looking. So agreements is the first thing you need to think about when you are fixing your assets. The other type of assets, such as trademark, they need to be registered, but that's not a rocket science. You call a lawyer, a patent attorney, they file the registration, and that's it. It's like a couple of minutes work if you know where to press and what to do, and it's done. IP, trademark is secure. The hassle is the ownership to your copyright. So the first thing is you secure the books. Then you have to think, if you establish the company and you transfer this IP to the company, how to fix all the rights with your employees. So the first thing that you have to do in fixing your assets is to have normal agreements with your employees, securing that every IP that is created lives within the company. No one takes it away. And that's not a problem for code, because for code we have an exclusion in the law. This is particularly important for any other type of intellectual property, graphic design, any type of design, copyright, texts that you provided in the game, describing rules or anything else. So you need to secure your employment contracts with the specific rules. And when that is ready, you get back to the bank and you need to do what? To evaluate.
Most probably you won't go back to the bank because banks are so not welcoming those types of loans. But anyway, if you are pitching also for the investors, you need to provide them with some insights or your idea like what the value of your IP would be. And the struggle here is that there are like no universal principles how you should assess them. Like, for instance, if we are looking at real estate, there are market values, there are certified evaluators to whom you can go and evaluate. In IP-based and in gaming, most probably you would use like typically like three methods, which would be one of the would be like income method. So you would project most probably what would be the income that you can generate with your gaming, and this might be like kind of discounted for whatever, but the idea is the future projection of the possible income that you can provide and so scale your business. And then the market value, but for this, market value means that you would look at the market and at kind of like lookalike gaming businesses to whom you can compare your gaming business. But the problem here is there is a lack of credible data, because this is private data and it is not disclosed like via, I don't know, reports, etc. Like, we have many reports on real estate transactions, etc., but we don't have that much of IP related reports. And the third would be sort of the value that would cost you to replace this IP asset if it gets lost or whatever, but it wouldn't be like that commonly used. So most probably it would be the income method that you can reach for your investor and tell, look, I see that I will market my business like this and that. My revenue will come from this. My plan for scaling for different markets, I will enter them, and how I will make it profitable. This game will be this and this and this. And then, of course, you have to keep in mind and maybe do a little bit research on your investor, whether it is an investor who is just like interested and maybe are willing to hear, or is it an investor who is specializing actually in gaming. And there are a couple of funds in Baltics who are specializing in gaming, in funding of gaming businesses. So they would be like more pro, and they would look actually, by the way, in your code. And here, by the way, it also would be a good idea to, if you approach such investors, to maybe have an NDA.
Yeah.
Because again, idea is not protected, copyright, etc. So be careful also if you are pitching to investors.
But that's a good point on the protection of the ideas.
Yes.
Idea can be protected either through patent, if it's patentable, but it's basically impossible to obtain any reasonable patent for software.
And also in gaming.
You cannot get. A patent for software can be issued only if the software comes with a hardware. So you have a specific type of hardware that solves patentable problem, and then you can patent it together with the hardware. So meaning you can patent a washing machine with a special software if it's patentable, new, and has novelty. But gaming software, which is pure software, you cannot patent. It's unpatentable. And that is the problem with patents. So the only way to protect your ideas, and I mean system, the idea of how the game starts, the plot even of the game. Because plot as such is not copyrightable. Only the specific plot, how it's written, the script, can be copyrighted. So the only way to protect ideas is through NDAs. Is to have secure NDA with everyone who works inside your company, starting with the founders, finishing with employees, and coming from outside. So don't worry if you are talking with lawyers, you are protected with NDA already because we have ethic codes and whatnot. But anyone else that comes from outside, including potential investors, have to sign NDA, and you have to be very specific on how you define what is your confidential information, or even lift it up to commercial secret. Because your plans, your development plans, your plots, your system, anything that is unpublished can be protected by the NDA. NDA cannot protect existing games and everything that consumers sees. But everything that is in development stage can be protected in the NDA, and that's number one thing that you need to do with your investor. And of course, you will not show the code at the moment, but if you are willing to open your code and show it, if you have a very expert like investor, that has to be secured as well.
Send NDA beforehand and
Before.
after that, the link.
Yes. The problem with the code is that nowadays technologies allows copying without copying a code and making some twists and turns so as to avoid a real infringement of IP rights. But showing and making the paperwork before you do the action is crucial for securing the protection of ideas. But again, that's back to the evaluation, and even if when banks or investors or funds evaluate it and say, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
I am buying your idea and I want to invest in it. What happens with those intellectual property assets or the main assets? Because gaming industry has two types of assets: IP assets and their employees. Anything, and of course, you need a lot more. You need computers, servers, offices, premises, whatnot. But that is changeable, very easy. You can switch, you can change. But IP assets and employees are something that is extremely important. And when an investor comes and wants to put a pledge,
Investor, sometimes they want to put a pledge. Pledge would be like more for the banks. And again, here's the problem with the banks, where they don't want to do anything, most probably with the IP assets, is because of the liquidity. So I can have a pledge, and I can have it like perfect, beautiful pledge in registries, on trademarks, on patents, and on the whole enterprise as such. The issue comes when I have to enforce the pledge to whom I will sell it. So where is the market for that? And I don't want, as a bank, to put too much effort to research the market, to approach the right buyers, etc. It's much easier for me to sell off and enforce the real estate as to look for the market who will be willing to buy the company or the IP rights. Nevertheless, for investors, what is of importance is, of course, they will undergo the legal due diligence. They will need to understand what kind of types of assets there are, who are crucial and essential for being able to generate cash flow and revenue potential, so that I, as an investor, can exit from the company either by refinancing or by selling the shares at the end of the day, depending on which way I choose. So these are the crucial aspects. But the pledge would be like more of the banks. Unless the investor would go with a mezzanine loan, which would mean that they are providing you with the finance, most probably it will be some pledge. But at the end of the day, if they see that it's better for them to convert this loan to equity, then they're most probably convert it to the equity.
so again, just to add up on what Laura said, a pledge can be very easily added to industrial property, trademarks, registry, design, and patents. Very easy. You just enter into the register and it's done. It's your rights are secured. You cannot transfer it, license it without approval of the creditor, and whatnot. And the biggest problem is with the code and with the software. That is the biggest problem. But nowadays investors are very creative, so they put a lot of contractual restraints on founders on what can be done and what cannot be done. So in that respect, it is okay. But here lies a trap in a sense, because when investors come, and if they buy a bigger share, sometimes miscommunication with founders and investors happen, and someone has to back off. And if the founder has to back off and wants to in order not to infringe upon the creation that you already did in the past, but it was invested by a third company. So you have to be prepared and make if you want to start again, a new company, a new idea, maybe something new, but just quite similar. You have to be very cautious because it's a line mine, and you need to be specific in that respect. But that's basically all in terms of scaling business. Good idea, yes, but not everything from perspective that you need to keep in mind. Because we have a lot of magic words in our legal language, such as MiCA, which changes perspective on things that were normal and not regulated for quite some time. For example, tokens. What is a token from legal perspective, Laura?
So, what a question.
Today, then we will discuss it. What it will be
Under
tomorrow.
MiCA, I would say it is an asset that is digital and that is in a blockchain and that might possibly have either value or it can grant you a certain right. So that is how it's defined under MiCA. And if you read it that like it's plain and simple, and then you have a certain type of assets and you need to kind of like squeeze it into this definition and it doesn't fit or it fits only partially.
So let's give an example. If I have a game,
Yeah.
and the game developer allows buying special avatar just for me. So I have my own personal avatar. No one else has it, only me. Is it under MiCA or no?
Most probably not.
Yes. Okay, but if the game allows me to get coins and exchange them for like super sword or I don't know some. I have a son and he plays those sword games. So excuse me my vocabulary. I know only these type of games. Yeah.
It might be classified as e-money token, but depends. Again, so under MiCA there are three types of assets which are regulated. So it's an not assets but tokens, let's say it like that. E-money tokens, which could be stable coins, and other types of crypto assets, which means every asset on the digital distribution ledger. And except non-fungible tokens, which is the first example that they gave you.
Avatars.
Yeah.
Or
But
pictures
again,
or art.
Again with disclosures from MiCA that under certain circumstances it can be classified as assets falling under the scope of MiCA.
What does it mean to become regulated in the MiCA?
We have to make distinction between the regulation. So there is regulation to put certain assets on the market, which means that if you are offering some certain assets that classify as crypto assets under MiCA, you have to obtain a consent from your regulator. You write like not 100 pages, but approximately white paper. You describe what is the asset, to whom it will be offered, how we will market it, etc., etc., etc. And then the other type is depending on the services that you provide. For instance, if you're a gaming company, it would depend on the services that you provide to your gamers, let's say. Yeah. And if you evaluate this, you have to be very cautious to understand whether or not you need to be licensed. And this will, you will come to this conclusion by evaluating the assets that you are offering and evaluating actually the mechanics and also the gaming, what you can do it within the game ecosystem.
So if you find, again, if you're on the evaluation process for investors coming in, this is one of the crucial aspects that an investor would look into, whether or not you are under regulation, financial regulation. And if they determine that you are, and you are not licensed, and you do not AML properly, and do not have capital and a lot of requirements that comes from the requirement of licensing, that's a big problem. You will not get investment, and probably they will show you red flags saying you
market, and they will look which of the solutions in the market fits them best and makes like more sense, and they most probably they will adopt the way the market behaves. So that's why maybe it is actually a good idea now to push the narrative, which is better for the game business.
Yeah, so it's the second like conclusion that we want you to get from today is that the window for opportunity is still open, but it's about to close in 18 months,
Yeah.
which is a hell of a short term for any type of business. And it could go either way. They could go stricter way, they could go more liberal way, it depends on the situation. Maybe it's time to have a collective approach towards your regulator and start prepping your regulator on how you would like NFTs being treated.
Yeah.
And in that respect, you can show and refer to any argument, but self-regulation in this respect and the balance between business opportunities, protection of consumers, financial hygiene and whatnot has to be
Can be achieved.
can be achieved. And do not expect to go with the most liberal point of view. I think you need to start looking at the golden middle where you can present to the regulators, but it's the moment where you need to start speaking and prepping the regulators. If not today, the term was yesterday, but if you haven't done it yesterday and you are here today, probably tomorrow is the best day to think of what to say to your regulators, because if you do not say, they're gonna regulate you either way. Because this is how European Union works, and unfortunately this window of opportunity is closing on you. So, and the last thing that we wanted to talk about is your consumers. So any type of game is not self-sufficient. You need someone who plays the game or who uses the software. So at the end of the day, you still have an element of consumer law protection. And everything that you cannot put into IP or finance falls somewhere, and it usually falls on the shoulders of consumers. So if you have everything that you write in your software becomes an agreement with your consumer. So if you are changing rules, irrespective of the reason why you are changing rules, you have to be cautious in terms of consumer. Because guess what? Every time a consumer downloads or enters or starts playing your game, even without purchasing anything or without registering with your platform, you'll have a contract with consumers. So you have to abide by consumer laws. And the golden law of consumer is more is more. More information to consumer at every step of the way, which is contractually relevant. So when the consumer enters a relationship with you, there is a perfect time to introduce certain set of rules. If a consumer is buying something, registering its credit card, or buying it any other way, it's a perfect opportunity to disclose what you're going to do with consumer when you're collecting data from consumer, which is another hell of a set of rules starting from GDPR. But consumer is a god under EU law, and he or she needs to be informed every step of the way if you decide to change the rules. And it's not a problem when you're changing the rules of the game he's playing, but the moment you're starting to tackle his or her tokens, that could become a problem. So you need to check very well if by changing the rules on tokens, on how tokens can be used, or if their value is increased or decreased, you are not infringing upon rights of consumers.
Yeah, well, what I would like to add on the consumer, you always have to keep in mind, and the assumption, which is very much pushed upon from regulators, is you have to assume that consumer, he does not have, the brain power to make any decisions or to understand each and everything. So you have to inform him or her on each step very purchasing certain tools, etc. So this would be most probably an unfair commercial practice, especially when it comes to the children and the minors, which are like the super special vulnerable group under consumers. And also keep in mind for investors, it will also be very much of importance that these unfair commercial practices are not on the daily agenda. No hidden costs, transparent, because again, investors, they are risking their reputation as well. They are investing in you. And if you, by chance or deliberately or not deliberately, are exercising some sort of unfair commercial practices, it will have impact on investors. So they will keep a focus on that definitely.
So in terms of, because up until this moment, and of course that doesn't apply to MiCA regulation, but if we are discussing disagreements with founders, disagreements with investors, it's all civil disputes. So you are risking damages if you breach the contract and damages are suffered. But if we are speaking of consumers, we are speaking of fines. And fines for unfair commercial practices against consumer, fines against misleading advertising. In Lithuania, it's 3% from your annual turnover, but not more than 100,000 euros. I know that in Estonia, this amount is 400,000 euros and something similar in Latvia.
Yeah.
So we're speaking of significant amounts for startups. And imagine the hassle that you have to undergo with communication with your authority. But breach for MiCA is even more breathtaking.
I would say like 5 million?
Yeah,
Something
so
like that.
it's more. So again, what Laura said is consider your consumer as prudent as 5-year-old could be.
Exactly.
So if you can communicate as clearly as you would with a 5-year-old, you're good to go.
Yeah. And transparency.
Yeah, transparency. More is more in.
Okay, so we move on now to a different panel hosted by our friends, our new friends from last year, from Tallinn, TGS Baltic. Their whole team is on the panel, coming from all 3 Baltic states. It's good to see them, so I would like to invite them on stage, and then I will flip the presentation.
Thank you. Do we meet? You hear me, yes? I promise to be loud. So, plot twist. There has to be 3 of us, but your dear friend Brit is stuck at the flight to Vilnius, and that was cancelled too. I think now he's in Warsaw. Yeah, so I'm here to give his best regards. That Tallinn is a fantastic place for fintech industry, not so good for connections. Flight connections.
Yes.
So we have to regroup and have a discussion between me. I am representing Legal Lithuania and Laura from Latvia. So we are lawyers, and lawyers is a particular group of people who always say no, even before business finishes asking the question. Can we do? No. Even if marketing comes, can we do this? No, you can't. Don't you even dare. And the best thing you can get from lawyers is fine until it's a fine. So today let's have a short discussion on what to do when you're scaling a gaming business in order to avoid fines, avoid disputes with your co-founders or investors, to secure your assets, get financing, and scaling your business. So bear with us. We have to stand 2 of us instead of 3. So let's start with financing. So when you have a good idea and your idea hit the ground running, it's a success. Consumers like it. But whether or not you like it or not, you have to have an investor in order to make your idea bigger. Unfortunately, in the history of world's best ideas, we don't have one which just lifted up without any investment. Laura, what we have to have in mind when we are thinking about investors and scaling gaming business?
Okay, so first of all, let's break it down to the basics. So how we look at the finance, it's most probably either debt finance, so which means like loans, or it's equity finance. think it's no surprise for you that banks are not into gaming and they are